Welcome to Untold British News. If you're tired of empty political promises and want the real story, you've come to the right place. Today we're revealing how Keir Starmer and Labour have fallen short of their promises, from tax hikes to economic policies. Stay with us, and let's dig into the truth behind the headlines. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe for honest updates from our fast-growing community. Labour swept into power with promises aimed at tackling Britain's core challenges: economic growth, fair taxation, support for the working class, and more. But in recent months, their actions tell a different story. Public opinion has taken a sharp turn, especially in Scotland and Wales, where a loss of faith in Labour is leading to the rise of new political forces like Reform. Today, we'll look at the data, analyze Labour's performance, and explore what this means for British politics. Labour's campaign was filled with promises of change that many voters believed would finally address the needs of the working class, support small businesses, and curb unfair taxation. Keir Starmer and his team outlined an ambitious manifesto with pledges to tackle inequality, increase opportunities, and support struggling sectors. Fast forward to today, and the story is quite different. Labour's approval ratings are slipping, especially in Scotland and Wales. Many of those who voted for Labour feel that their promises have been broken or outright ignored. Policies that were supposed to ease the tax burden, for instance, have instead led to even higher tax rates, especially for those in Scotland, where Labour's recent tax changes have left the middle class and business owners frustrated. Imagine a small business owner in Scotland who voted Labour, believing the party would reduce business taxes and create a supportive environment. Instead, he finds himself paying higher taxes than ever before, struggling to keep his business afloat. Stories like his are common, as many who were once Labour supporters now feel betrayed by policies that seem to do the opposite of what was promised. Let's take a close look at the numbers. In Scotland, Labour's support has dropped from around 30% to just 23%. A dramatic shift that suggests deep dissatisfaction among Scottish voters. If an election were held today, Labour would lose around 13 of their current 37 seats, reducing their presence in Westminster and weakening their influence. What's driving this exodus of Labour supporters in Scotland? One major factor is Labour's tax policies. Scotland already has the highest tax rates in the UK, and with Labour's recent budget changes, the burden on Scottish workers and businesses has only grown. This has led to a perception that Labour is no different from previous governments that imposed heavy taxes with little in return for ordinary citizens. Another reason for Labour's decline in Scotland is the presence of strong alternatives. The SNP continues to dominate the Scottish political landscape, particularly in regions with a pro-independent sentiment. Meanwhile, the Conservatives have seen a slight increase in support as well, appealing to voters who are fed up with high taxes and government overreach. The competition from both sides leaves Labour caught in a tough spot, unable to satisfy either pro-independence or unionist voters. If this trend continues, Labour could face a situation where they're left with just a few seats in Scotland, concentrated mainly in the Central Belt. In regions where Labour's majority is thin, a small swing of even 1.5% toward the SNP could result in further losses. This would be a devastating blow for Labour's influence in Westminster and would make it nearly impossible for them to achieve a majority without significant support from other regions. Enter Reform, a rising political force that is capitalizing on Labour's perceived failures. Reform has positioned itself as the party for disillusioned Labour voters, especially those frustrated with high taxes and a lack of meaningful change. With Labour's approval dropping, Reform has gained ground and is now within 1% of becoming the third largest party in Scotland, trailing only the Conservatives. Political analyst Professor John Curtis recently highlighted how Reform is capturing Labour's disillusioned base. According to him, the growing unpopularity of Keir Starmer's leadership has led many voters to explore other options, with Reform emerging as a prominent alternative. In August, only 7% of former Labour voters were considering Reform, but that figure has doubled to 14% in recent polls. Imagine if Reform continues to grow at this rate. In the next Scottish election, they could secure enough seats to play a pivotal role in Parliament. This would open the door to alliances or coalitions, potentially making reform a kingmaker in Scottish politics. If reform gains a foothold, it could even sway decisions on key issues, from economic policies to Scotland's stance on independence. The story is similar in Wales, where Labour is also seeing a decrease in support. Welsh voters, like their Scottish counterparts, are disappointed by Labour's inability to deliver on its promises. Labour's tax policies in particular have alienated middle-income earners and small businesses, who feel they're bearing the brunt of these economic changes. One factor that makes the situation unique in Wales is the proportional voting system used in the Welsh Senedd. This system gives smaller parties like Reform a greater chance to win seats and make an impact. As a result, Reform is expected to gain several seats, potentially becoming the third largest party in the Welsh Parliament. This shift in Wales has broader implications for UK politics. If Reform can establish itself as a credible alternative to Labour, it could change the dynamics in Westminster as well. Reform's rise in Wales shows that dissatisfaction with Labour isn't limited to Scotland. It's a growing trend across multiple regions, signaling a potential realignment in British politics. One of the most controversial aspects of Labour's tax policies is the freeze on ISA allowances until 2030. While this may seem like a minor adjustment, it has significant consequences for savers. As inflation rises, the real value of ISA savings decreases, meaning that people can save less tax-free over time. This decision is expected to bring in £600 million in extra tax revenue for the Treasury, but at what cost? Many middle-income families who rely on ISAs to save for the future now find themselves at a disadvantage. Without the ability to save tax-free, they face higher taxes on their income, capital gains, and dividends. This has led to widespread frustration as people feel they're being punished for trying to save responsibly. Financial experts have weighed in, calling the ISA freeze a stealth tax that unfairly targets savers. According to Interactive Investor, if the ISA allowance had kept pace with inflation, savers could have deposited nearly £26,000 in their ISAs by 2030. Instead, they're limited to the current allowance, which reduces in real terms each year as inflation erodes its value. We recently asked our Untold British News community what they thought about Labour's performance, and the response was overwhelmingly negative. Over 70% of respondents said they feel Labour has failed to deliver on its promises. Many of you shared personal stories about how Labour's policies have impacted your finances, from higher taxes to decreased savings options. One viewer, Tom, shared his experience. "I've been saving for my children's future, but with the ISA freeze, it's almost impossible to save enough without being hit by taxes. Labour promised to support families like mine, but it feels like we're being punished for planning ahead." Another viewer, Emily, commented, "I voted for Labour because I believe they would prioritize the working class, but with each new policy, I feel less and less hopeful about the future." We want to keep this conversation going. Drop a comment below and let us know. Do you think Labour can regain the public's trust? Or is it time for a new direction in British politics? Your insights and experiences help shape our discussions here on Untold British News.